All right. So, yeah. Hello, everyone. I guess, yeah, some of you have been in the morning and then, yeah, some of you will be in evening. Yeah. So, good morning, good evening, everyone. Once again, welcome to our Learning Along series with Premier's Academy. Myself, Narendrian. Yeah. I'm a federated player and then I have been coaching with Premier's Academy for the last 3 years. Yeah. Pretty excited. Let's see. Let's straight away jump into the topic. So today's topic in Learn Along series will be placement of pieces in the middle game. Usually, guys, the main reason why a game is going away from our hands is um, maybe misplacement of pieces. Yeah. So. that is what obviously can lead us into some trouble, right? And I guess most of you guys, are already aware of basic opening principles, right? Obviously, so most of you should be, pretty good with their openings. But anyways, just for a quick recap, so let's try to just go for a quick recap of basic opening principles. Okay, I usually follow 6 points when it comes to basic opening principles. Yeah, so three do's and then three don'ts. I would like to give a pass here, and then maybe if any of the kids in the chat, can you guys let me know like what you guys will do in the opening? Yeah. Any idea on the do's and don'ts of the opening? Yeah. Let's take a break. Yeah. So fine. All right. Okay. Come on, guys. Any other points which you can mention? Yeah. So when it comes to opening, yeah. So all right. Okay. Basically, yeah. I'll usually follow three do's and then three don'ts when it comes to opening. Yeah. So basically, the do's goes like this. We always start with the center pawns. Yeah, because when it comes to chess, center control is very important. Yeah. Any opening you play, we generally start with the center pawn so that we can control most of these squares in the center, right? And after this, we would try to develop the knights and bishops towards the center, right? So once again, when it comes to the pawns and also when it comes to developing the knights and bishops, center control plays a very crucial role. Yeah. So the more you control the center, the better the game is, right? So we start with the center pawns and then we try to develop our knights and bishops towards the center. And then we would try to castle our king as soon as possible, maybe within 5 or maximum 10 moves. Yeah, basically for the safety of our king. So these are the do's we will be doing when it comes to opening. Any opening you take, yeah. Any opening you take, these three do's will be the common thing. So starting with the center pawn and then so someone is sending in the chat like London system. Once again, any opening you take. So these will be the common do's. Yeah. So starting with the center pawns and then so developing the knights and bishops towards the center and then castling our king as soon as possible, maximum within 10 moves. Yeah. And basically, what are the don'ts? Yeah. Maybe Yashwant, you can send it in chat. I guess you are watching it. So, what are the don'ts when it comes to the opening? Like, what are the things we need to avoid? Yeah, when it comes to the opening. You can maybe point out a few points. Let's take a pass here. Let's wait for the kids to chat. So, uh, All right. So, okay. Let's proceed with the don'ts. Yeah. So, we generally, yeah, try avoiding developing a queen early, right? So, yeah, because there is a lot of chance that if you develop your queen early, there are a lot of chances that our queen might be in trouble, and yeah, and we might also end up losing a queen early, right? Because in the opening, our opponent will also busy developing his minor pieces, and with all these minor pieces attacking our queen, it would be little difficult, right? So yeah, so we generally say try moving your queen out, like avoid, like kindly avoid that at least for first 10 moves. Maybe after 10 moves, you can yeah, so bring out your queen. Yeah, so. And then you can avoid repeating the same piece again and again. Yeah. So, for example, let's say you already opened your night. So now let's say that you can now focus on the other sleeping pieces. Yeah. For example, you can make way for the other knight. Yeah. So develop your bishop and then yeah. So make way for the other bishop. Yeah. So but let's say you're repeating the same knight again and again. This these might create some trouble, right? Because opponent will be keep on developing his pieces, and then you will be just repeating the same piece here and there again and again. Yeah. So, and after all these things, it would be black who's gonna attack you first, right? So, yeah. Yeah, and other than the center pawns, we don't try to move the rest of the pawns unless it is needed. Yeah. So, yeah. Usually, these are the things that we will have to take care when it comes to basic opening principles, right? So, three do's: start with the center pawn and then develop your knights and bishops towards the center, just to make sure that you have a very good center control, and then castle your king as soon as possible, right? So, these are the do's. And what are the don'ts? Do not develop your queen early. And yeah, so avoid repeating your same piece again and again. And then, yeah, other than the center pawns, try not to move the rest of the pawns unless it is needed. Yeah. So, okay, now let's move on to the middle game. Yeah. So, this is where our actual topic starts. So, placement of pieces in the middle game. Right. So, I'm going to give you some points with pointing out each and every piece. Okay. So, like what we have to do with the pawns, and what we have to do with the bishops in the middle game, what we have to do with the knights in the middle game, and followed by rooks, queen, and then the king. Okay, so I'll let you know one by one. So yeah, yeah. While discussing about this basic opening principles, the last point which I have mentioned was try not to move the rest of the pawns other than the center pawns, right? So that is where actually our yeah, so placement of the pawns will also uh, get starting. So the main reason behind why we recommend this is to have a good pawn structure. Okay, so yeah, um, maybe can someone tell me any idea of like what is a pawn structure? Anyone in the chat? Yeah. So maybe you can point out some general pawn structures too. So yeah. All right, maybe I'll give you an example. Yeah. So I guess yeah, you can maybe look at the structure and then yeah, so you can let me know. Chain pawn, very good. Yashwant. Yeah. So anything else? Anything else? Yeah, yeah. Other than chain pawn, yeah. So any other structures, guys? So okay, all right. So fine. So basically, guys, yeah. So A good pawn structure is very important when it comes to middle game. Okay, so yeah, um, because you will be playing a very good opening, you will be playing a very good middle game. Your end game will also be equally fighting. But however, let's say if we are down one pawn, okay, so actually that might change the result completely, right? So imagine losing a game by just down a pawn. That will be little tough, right? So yeah, so maintaining a good pawn structure is a prime key. Yeah, so to have a good middle game and good end game, right? Because when it comes to end game, even minor pieces, rooks and queen won't be there sometimes, right? So, but pawns will be definitely there. It would be there in the end game. So, maintaining a good pawn structure is very important. Yeah. So, here we have a so basically these kind of structure we call it as connected pawns. Yeah. So, like someone said, there is a pawn chain, right? So again, yeah. So this you can also call it as a pawn chain, right? So one pawn depending on another pawn, another pawn depending the another pawn, yeah. And also, let's say if there is another pawn on a2 and then one on e4, f3, and then the pawn on g2, and basically this we call it as a pyramid, right? So pyramid pawn structure. So, anyways, as long as you have a connected pawns like this, where one pawn is close to the another pawn, your pawn structure is quite good. Yeah, you don't need to worry about anything. But look at the black pawns. Yeah, in the same situation, look at the black pawns. Black pawns are not connected to each other, right? So yeah, so they at least share one square gap between them, right? So these pawns we call it as isolated pawns. Yeah, so this is like a little bad structure, maybe a little weakness. Yeah. So this is also one reason why we usually say never move any of the pawns unless you have a reason for it, right? So because in the starting, once you move your center pawn, so these will be like connected pawns on the A, B, and C file, and then the F, G, and H file, and that would be yeah, little good structure for you, right? So yeah. So anyways, so this is with the connected pawns and then isolated pawn. Let's move on to the next one. So okay. Here once again I'm having yeah, so two pawns, one on a6 and then another one is on b5. Maybe someone in the chat can guess any idea what kind of structure is this? Yeah. So let's take a small break again. Yeah. So let's see if any of the kids are aware of this. Yeah. So so what kind of pawn structure we are having right now? Any guesses? Anyone? So all right. Okay. So yeah. All right. So yeah, this looks like connected pawns, but however, yeah. So this we call it as a passed pawn. Okay. Again, so here you can see both the white pawns are connected. But however, yeah, so this we call it as a passed pawn. Okay, so now comes the question, sir, what is a passed pawn? Right. So basically, guys, a passed pawn is a pawn which cannot be stopped by any of your opponent pawns. Yeah. For example, take this pawn on g5 and h4. It has been blocked by the black pawns. Right. So these pawns cannot go forward. Yeah, basically these pawns are stuck over there, right? But let's take this pawn on a6 and b5. So there is no black pawns to stop them, either to block them or to capture them, right? So if there is no pawns in front of your pawn to either stop it, block it, or capture it, let's say you are having a very clear path towards the end of the board. So those pawns we call it as a passed pawn. Okay, so yeah. And now two pawns are here. Basically, these we call it as connected passed pawns. Yeah. So basically, a passed pawn and then a connected passed pawn is very powerful when it comes to an end game. Yeah. So fine. I'll just give an idea like what happens. Yeah. So basically, you can just keep pushing the pawn towards the end, and then you can easily win the game. But let's say if the black king is quite closer, then you can easily yeah bring your king also closer. Yeah, so maybe the black king will be busy capturing the pawns on the queen side, and you can also bring your king forward and capture these pawns on the king side. Yeah, a passed pawn is always useful thing for you. So yeah, so and that too when it comes to an endgame, you can easily distract the opponent king and escape from all sort of oppositions. Yeah, and then you can easily enter into the opponent's territory using your king. Right. So yeah. So this is the passed pawn. So previously we discussed about connected pawns, and then we discussed about isolated pawns. So now we are discussing about passed pawns. So okay. So this is the next one. So questions for the kids. Like kids, any idea what kind of structure is here? Yeah. So any guesses? So so all the pawns have some common alignment, maybe. Yeah. So any guess like what sort of pawn structure is this? All right. So yeah, connected pawns is okay. Any other guess? Any other guess? So all right. So basically, kids, this we call it as doubled pawns. Okay. So if two pawns are in the same file, so this is A file and this is C file and then this is G file, right? So if two pawns are back to back in the same file, then we usually call it as a double pawn. Okay, so double pawns, if it is in the center, it might be little advantage, but usually these kind of double pawn is it's actually a disadvantage. Yeah. So why I'm saying this because maybe if it is in the center, it can control a lot of center squares, but usually, these double bonds will happen in a corner piles only, and generally it is considered as a weakness. Yeah. So, so basically, as of now, we discussed about connected pawns, isolated pawns, and then passed pawns, connected passed pawns, and then now we are discussing about double the pawns. So, basically, these connected pawns, pawn chain, pawn pyramid, yeah. So, passed pawns, connected passed pawns, all these are a good structure for you, but let's say you're having isolated pawns and then doubled pawns and then something like this. So these are quite disadvantages. These things you have to avoid. Yeah. So, okay, let's see what is next. So, again, so here we have this pawn on e6. So, once again, let's take a small break and let's ask the kids in the chat. So, kids, any idea like what kind of pawn structure here? All right. Any guesses? Okay. All right. So basically, this pawn on e6, we call it as a backwards pawn. Okay. So yeah. Basically, a backwards pawn is a pawn which is not protected by any of his fellow pawns. Yeah. For example, here you can see that this pawn on e6 is actually protecting this pawn on d5. But however, this pawn is not being protected by any of the follow pawns, right? So yeah, there is no pawn on f7 to protect it, or like neither there is no pawn on d7 to protect it, right? So yeah. So this we call it as a backwards pawn. Yeah, a backwards pawn is a pawn which is generally yeah, so not being defended by any of the fellow pawns. right? So, yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next one. So, okay. All right. So here there is a pawn structure like this. We call it as a hanging pawn. I guess this you should be aware. You guys should be aware as of now. So basically, a hanging piece is a piece which doesn't have any support or any protection, right? You can just simply capture it for free. Likewise, a hanging pawn is a pawn which doesn't have any protection or any defense that can be easily targeted. Yeah. So in this case, I can see both white and black as having one isolate, like I mean, yeah, hanging pawn. So maybe which both of them can target in the future. Yeah. So this pawn doesn't have any protection. So seems like it is hanging. So yeah. So as of now, we cannot capture it immediately. But yeah, let's say if a pawn doesn't have any sort of protection, then we usually call it as a hanging pawn. Right. So yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Yeah, this is isolated pawn. This we already discussed. Right. So yeah. So yeah. So that is with the pawn structures. So as of now, I would recommend. Yeah. So if you follow the sixth point in the basic opening principles, yeah. So avoid moving the rest of the pawns unless you have any main reason for that. So then usually you will be having a very good pawn structure. Yeah, no need to worry about that. You can just simply focus on your middle game ideas and strategies. Okay, so yeah, so okay, so let me maybe write it down. So yeah, placement of pieces in the middle game. So and first we started with pawns. So yeah, when it comes to pawns, its structure is always very important. Yeah. So yeah, so a good pawn structure is always important. Yeah, when it comes to middle game. So yeah, always maintain a good pawn structure. Okay, so make sure that you have some connected pawns. Yeah. So and yeah, so if possible, try to create some passed pawns. And yeah, so make sure you avoid any sort of isolated pawn, hanging pawn. Avoid creating any doubled pawns, etc. Okay, so um, imagine you got a double pawn. Okay, so and you kind of like don't know like how to rescue from there. For example, let's say here white opens with d4 and then yeah, black plays maybe pawn to d5. The queen's pawn opening is on the board. Yeah, so white plays knight to f3 and then yeah, black is also continuing maybe with pawn to e6. So white plays pawn e3 and black plays knight f6. White continues with pawn c4. Yeah, the idea is if d captures on c4, it will help white to develop his bishop with a tempo, right? So yeah, so white continues with pawn c4, and let's say black is continuing with maybe pawn to c6, and white continues with knight to c3. Okay, and black plays bishop to b4, pinning this knight. So now the knight cannot move because then the king would be in trouble, right? So, and let's say white just simply continues with developing the bishop. Yeah. So, preparing to castle the king. And let's say bishop captures on c3 and b captures on c. Okay. So, now you kind of little bit worried because that I got a doubled pawn. So, yeah, like how can I get rid of this structure? Yeah. Quite simple. You can just try to exchange the pawn in front of it. Yeah. For example, let's say black just simply castles. Yeah. So black castles here, and then you can just simply capture the pawn on d5 using your pawn on c4. Right. So pawn takes pawn, and then pawn c4. That's it. So now your pawn structure is very good. Yeah. So if black captures, you can always capture it back with your bishop, developing your bishop with a tempo, and you have a connected pawns on your king side. So yeah. Yeah, maybe yeah, this is one way you can easily get rid of your double the pawns, right? So just make sure you try to exchange the pawn in front of your double the pawns. Okay, so yeah. But yeah, as I said earlier, as long as you're not moving any of unnecessary pawn moves, your pawn structure will usually be good. Yeah, just keep an eye on that. Okay, so along with your middle game tactics and strategies, that just keep an eye on your pawn structures. So let's move on to the next thing. Okay. So let's see what we can do with the bishops. Okay. So yeah. So what should we do with the bishops in the middle game? Like where should we place it? Yeah. So which will be a good square for the bishops. So let's see what we can do with this. Okay. So guys, I'm gonna ask one question here. So does someone know like what is a open file and what is a closed file? Open diagonal, closed diagonal, something like that. Like, have you guys heard of this in your classes before? Yeah. Okay, I got one yes sir in the chat. So, anyone else? Like, have you guys heard about open files, open diagonals, closed files, closed diagonals, something like that? So, okay, all right. So, fine. Hope most of you should be aware of it. Yeah. So, let's say, for example, yeah. Uh, for those who are hearing this for first time, like open files, closed files, open ranks, and then open diagonals. So basically, let's say that if you, yeah, so do not have any sort of pieces in an file that we call it as an open file. Okay. For example, let's say that, okay, let's say that, maybe let's clear the question. Yeah. So let's clear the board and then I'll give you a situation. So, oh, okay. All right. So let's say this was the case. Okay. So, yeah. So here there is one file which doesn't have any sort of pieces, right? So on the A file, you can see there is like four pieces are there. On the B file, there is two pieces. On C file, there is a pawn on C6. But when it comes to D file, there is literally no pieces over there, right? So yeah, it's a complete open file. No pieces are there. So this is what we generally call it as an open file where there is no pieces in that particular file. Yeah. So and the rest of them we call it as closed files. Simple. Yeah. If there is a piece in a particular file that we call it as closed, and let's say if it is open, yeah, so then we call it as an open file. Diagonals is also same. Okay. So let's say if your bishop can able to control maximum number of squares in a particular diagonal, then you can call it as open diagonal. But let's say your bishop is kind of stuck. Yeah. So okay. Imagine this was the case. Okay, so now as of now, it looks like this bishop on black bishop on d7 is kind of stuck between his own pawns, right? So yeah, so this bishop doesn't have any sort of squares where he can move immediately, right? So basically, now this bishop is in a closed diagonal. Yeah. So fine. So basically, the idea is quite simple. Yeah. So when it comes to the middle game, and if you're gonna use your bishops, just make sure you place your bishops in open diagonals. Simple. Yeah. So try. So let's say if you are already having a bishop which has been kind of inactive, just try to activate it. Okay. So try to bring your bishops to open diagonals so that you can make the most out of them. Yeah. So open diagonal. Yeah. So okay. Once again, let's say that. I have also noticed in some of your games, yeah. So while doing game analysis, so let's say, yeah, okay. So let's say white opens with pawn to d4 here, yeah. So and then black is also playing pawn to d5, yeah. So white continues with knight to f3, black plays pawn c6, white kind of plays again pawn to g3, and then black is playing pawn c6. So even though it looks like black is kind of creating a pawn chain, like pawn pyramid in the center, but it looks like your bishop is kind of stuck inside, right? So it looks like the black bishop is kind of stuck inside. Now, basically, the diagonals are closed. Yeah. So before playing pawn e6, maybe this bishop is having one open diagonal where it can be pretty much active. Yeah, maybe after bringing the bishop to f5, black can close this diagonal by playing pawn e6. But if black plays pawn e6 immediately, even though it's kind of looking like a good pawn structure, it's kind of blocking our own bishop, right? So basically in the middle game, we need to make sure our bishops are always placed in an open diagonal. Yeah. So some common mistakes you can see here is, for example, white already played pawn d4. Right. So imagine now white is trying to develop this bishop as a dragon bishop. Yeah. So for example, let's say b2, b2 to b3, and then black plays knight f6. You play bishop to b2. Yeah. Black plays something like pawn e6, and then yeah. So pawn to c3. So bishop e7, pawn e3. Um. Okay. As of now, it looks like yeah. So you're blocking your own bishop with your pawns. Right. The bishop is something which should have some particular diagonal to control, right? But now it looks like your own pawns are just simply blocking your bishop's diagonal. So now, as of now, that bishop would be little inactive. All right. So yeah. So these are some common things which we do. Yeah. Just first try to identify that. Yeah. So which bishop is in a closed diagonal, and just try to activate it by bringing it to the open diagonal. Yeah. This is with the bishops. So let's move on to the next piece. Yeah. So which is the knights. Yeah. So all right. So pawns we discussed, we need to maintain a good pawn structure in the middle game. So and when it comes to bishop, we need to place it in open diagonals. Let's move on to the knight. So yeah. So what should we do with the knights in the middle game? Yeah. So usually the knight would be on f3 and c3, and then the black knight would be on f6 and c6, right? In some circumstances, the knights would be defending each other. For example, the knight on f3 would be defended by this knight on d2. Black also can do the same. One knight would be on f6 and another knight would be on d7. Yeah, so basically the knights will be like this in the opening. Yeah, so when it comes to middle game, just maintain the knights in the center and just try to shift them where it can control maximum number of squares. Yeah, so if I'm not wrong, like in your basic classes, yeah, in your beginners level classes, you might have taught about something, right? So if it is in the center, it can control maximum number of squares. So maximum of 8. But let's say that if you're placing a knight in a corner, yeah, so its movement will like get reduced, right? So if the knight is in a corner, now it can control maximum only two number of squares, right? So just make sure the knight is in the center, maintain the knights in the center, and if possible, try to shift your knight to outpost. Okay, so there is something called outpost. So any kids aware of this topic? Yeah, when it comes to outpost. So once again, let's take a small break over here. So maybe Yashwant, you can answer. Any idea like what is an outpost? Yeah. So okay. Any guesses? What is an outpost? Benches. Okay. All right. So yeah. Basically, guys, an outpost refers to a particular square. Okay, an outpost refers to a particular square which cannot be attacked by any of the opponent pawns. Okay, for example, here you can say that e6 is an outpost square because you cannot attack the e6 square with the black pawns, right? So there is no black pawns which can, yeah, so attack that square on e6. So it should be protected at the same time. It cannot be attacked by any of the your opponent pawns, right? So that is what we generally call it as an outpost, and just simply try to shift your knight towards an outpost, yeah, when it comes to middle game, yeah. Here, for example, you can also say c5 is an outpost, yeah, because c5 has been well protected and it cannot be attacked by any of the black pawns. So, yeah. Let's say in this case, yeah. So, once again, it is white to play. The knight is already on c3. c3 itself is a good square for the knight, right? So, we are like developing the knight towards the center. But here we have an outpost here, yeah, which is basically the square which is on d5, yeah. So, because this square is being protected, and also there is no c pawn to attack it, there is no e pawn to attack it, right? So yeah, so you can just simply shift this knight to d5, yeah. So after moving this knight to d5, you can see that black doesn't have any knight to exchange it, or there is no light square bishop to exchange this knight. Right. So if Black wants to get rid of this knight, yeah, he has to maybe consider giving up his rook for this knight, maybe going for an exchange down. But yeah, it completely depends on the situation. So yeah, but this knight is a monster knight now, so it cannot be eliminated by any of the black pawns, or like any of the light square bishop is also not there. Right. So yeah. All right. So. This is with the outpost. So here you can see again this d5 is an outpost, right? Which cannot be attacked by any of the black pawns, and it has been well protected. Black also doesn't have a light square bishop. Only one thing is there. If you play knight e5 immediately, black can consider capturing the knight. But why don't you just eliminate the black knight first? Yeah, so just play bishop captures on f6. Yeah, again, bishop captures on f6. Now just simply shift this knight to the outpost of d5. Yeah. So, all right. So, okay. Maybe now, okay, fine. So basically, guys, in this position, one of the white knight is already in an outpost square. Yeah. So, can someone in the chat let me know like which white knight is already in an outpost? Yeah. So let's again take a small break. Yeah. So one of the white knight is already in an outpost square. Like, can someone let me know which knight is in the outpost? Yeah. All right. Okay. Fine. So basically, this knight which is on e5, yeah. So this knight on e5, basically you can say that knight is an outpost square because it cannot be attacked by any of the black pawns, right? So there is no d pawn, there is no f pawn, but and also it has been well protected, right? So yeah. Anyways, so yeah. All right. So let's move on to the next one. So okay. All right, this is black to play. So here in this case, we need to bring one of our black knight to an outpost, and I'm guessing maybe c4 is an outpost square here. Yeah, because this square which cannot be attacked by any of the white pawns, so there is no d pawn or like there is no b pawn, and it has also been well protected. Right. So I guess you can easily shift your knight to c4 in couple of moves. So maybe first moving the knight to a5 and then yeah, so knight to c4. Yeah, so something like this. So anyways, so Yeah, so let's move on. Maybe, yeah, some of you might even consider like why not E4 is an outpost because it has been well protected. There is no pawns to come and attack it immediately. But there is a pawn on F2. Even though this pawn cannot attack E4 immediately, but in the future it can come and attack, right? So yeah, so we can eliminate E4. So it should be like there is no way, yeah, there is no way that any of your opponent pawns can come and attack that particular square, and it should also be protected. Yeah, so something like this. So yeah, yeah, we can, yeah, so maybe move on to the next piece. So that is with the knights. Yeah, so when it comes to the knights in the middle game, just make sure it is very active in the center. And if it is already active in the center, just try to shift them to an outpost. Yeah, identify an outpost square. Yeah, which has been protected, well protected, and then cannot be attacked by any of the opponent pawns. So identify an outpost and then shift your knights to an outpost square. Yeah, so that will be a very good square for your knight, very good placement for your knight. Yeah. So as of now, we have completed three pieces, placement of three pieces when it comes to the middle game. Yeah. When it comes to the pawns, we need to maintain a good structure. When it comes to the bishops, we need to yeah, place them in open diagonals so that we can make most out of them. Yeah. And when it comes to knight, we need to maintain them in the center. And also, if possible, we need to identify an outpost and we need to shift the knights to the outpost square. Yeah. So now let's move on to the next piece, which is the rook. Yeah. So, okay. So now comes the question, sir, like what should we do with the rooks in the middle game? Yeah. So, and again, some of you might even have this question, sir. Usually the rooks are not much active when it comes to middle game, right? So they are activated mostly in the end game only. Yeah, pretty much. I also agree with that. Usually the rooks will remain on, yeah, so F file and yeah, so yeah, after castling, the usually remain on F and A file, right? So yeah. But yeah, anyways, so sometimes we will also get some chances to activate our rooks in the middle game itself. Depends on the situation. Yeah. So, anyways, so like the bishops, yeah, how we try to activate the bishops by keeping them in open diagonals, the rooks are also same. Okay. You need to place them in an open file. Simple. Yeah. So, so try to identify the open files in your game and then try to shift your rooks to those open files before your opponent does. Yeah. So for example, let's say that we have a situation like this. Okay. So okay. So imagine this was pretty much almost close to an end game. Yeah. So you might have crossed the middle game, traded off all the minor pieces, traded off the queens. Yeah. So now for better understanding, I'm just placing the roots. Yeah. So fine. And you can see there is, yeah, C file is empty, D file is empty, E file is empty. All these are open files, right? The rest of the files has been occupied. So those are like closed files. And we have three open files here, and you have to do it before your opponent, yeah, because sometimes your opponent will also try to shift his rooks to the open files, and then now he will be enjoying those open files, right? So yeah, but let's say if you can able to bring both of your rooks to an open file even before your opponent, then basically you have the advantage. Yeah. So and now comes the question, sir, I already have my rooks in an open file. Yeah, so then what should I do? In that case, just try to double up the rooks. Yeah. So just bring the rook to C2 and C1, double up the rooks in the same file. Or let's say you got two open files like this for both of your rooks, then just simply try to shift your rooks to the seventh rank. Yeah. The rooks on seventh rank is always very much powerful. I will also quickly let you know one tactic when it comes to rooks on seventh rank. Yeah. For example, let's say that both of your rooks are in the yeah, seventh rank, and then you have a situation like this. Okay, so So even though the pieces are equal, both white and black has 5 pawns each and then two rooks. White is very much winning this because white's rooks, both of the rooks are in the seventh rank, right? So it's basically white to play, and white can easily create a mate in three. Yeah, maybe some intermediate kids can solve this, I guess. So yeah. So yeah, this is just to explain the power of the rooks in the seventh rank. It's white to play, and there is a mate in three here. Like, can someone send the answer in the chat? Once again, let's take a break. So all right. So okay. Yeah. Anyways, so the answer would be rook to g7, which comes with a check. Yeah. So Black King doesn't have any other escaping squares. He's supposed to go to h8. Yeah. So and once again you go rook h7 check. Yeah. So king will go to g8. Once again that is pose, and now you bring this rook on c7 to g7. That would be a checkmate. Yeah. So rooks on seventh rank is always a quite powerful one. Yeah. So fine. So yeah, when it comes to the rook, so first thing you need to do is bring them to the open files before your opponent does. And let's say if you already have your rook in an open file, just try to bring both of the rooks. Try to double them up. And let's say you got both of your rooks in an open file, then just simply try them to shift to the seventh rank. Yeah. So the rooks on seventh rank is always, yeah, great wonders. Yeah. Anyways, so this is with the rooks. So yeah, when it comes to the middle game, you just need to try to place them, try to shift them in an open file. Yeah, and then shift them to the seventh rank for making the most out of them. Let's move on to the next one, which is the queen. Yeah. So so all right. So, sir, what should we do with the queen? So, yeah, basically, I'm gonna let you know one thing, like which maybe most of you, yeah, so will hesitate to do. But however, this was helping me most of the time. I usually do this. So basically, guys, queen is a little powerful piece. Okay, so and it can actually change the game to any side. Yeah. So let's say you're like down a knight or down a bishop, and maybe you're, let's say you're in a winning game. Yeah, you're in a winning game. You're having a knight, and extra bishop, and you're still kind of yeah, didn't trade the queens. Okay, so then which means black is still having the queen. Your opponent is still having the queen, and he has a possibility of doing some tactic with this queen. Right. So generally I prefer trading the queens in the middle game itself. So yeah, I avoid the queen in games because it's kind of little tough compared to the rest of the end games. Yeah, when it comes to the pawn end game, bishop end game, knight end game, rook end game, all these are quite easy. But compared to all these, queen end game is really tough. Yeah, so because it's very simple, guys. Queen is the powerful one. It can control like maximum number of squares in the center. It would be very hard to calculate which particular square will be the best square for the queen. Okay, so that is one reason why usually, yeah, yeah, I prefer this trading the queen early itself. But sometimes we don't get that right. So your opponent's favorite piece might be the queen, and he might not ready for a he might not maybe yeah so agree for a queen exchange. He might be declining it. But in that case, you just need to maintain one thing. Yeah. So make sure you centralize your queen, and you always have a retreating square for your queen. Okay. So yeah. So make sure the queen is in the center, yeah. So and also it should be having a retreating square. Okay, so sometimes because if you take your queen towards the corner, there are chances that your queen might get trapped. Yeah. So for example, let's say that. You're centralizing your queen. Okay, so clear board. Let's say that you have a queen over here. So all right. So okay, this is just a random situation. Okay, so don't take it quite seriously. So yeah, okay, yeah, all right. Let's say this was the case. Okay, so so it looks like white has actually centralized his queen. His queen is in the center, but is there any retreating square for the queen? Let's say if the queen is in trouble, can this queen come back anywhere or move sideways? Or can it even go forward? Yeah. So it looks like you have centralized your queen, but however, there is no square to retreat, right? So yeah. So yeah, and don't come and complain later, sir. You asked me to centralize the queen. I centralized the queen, but now my queen got trapped. Yeah. So while centralizing, just make sure that yeah, you always have a retreating square for your queen. Okay, that is equally important. And usually you will be find some hanging pawns in the corner, but I would prefer don't go for it unless you don't find any move to play. Yeah. So because sometimes in order to capture a hanging pawn, you would try to move your queen towards a corner, but that can also end up in trapping your queen. Yeah. So something like that. So anyways, so this is with the queen. My first priority would be try to exchange it as soon as possible. Yeah. So, but let's say sometimes if you're, yeah, so gonna play with the queen, but make sure you centralize it and it controls most number of squares. And very important thing, in order to avoid getting your queen trapped, you need to make sure there is always a retreating square. Yeah. So, all right. So let's move on to the last piece, which is the king. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So now comes the question, sir, what should we actually do with the king? Yeah, so okay, pawns I can understand that you are trying to yeah keep it in a, good pawn structure, maintain a good pawn structure. Bishops are also pretty much understandable. Yeah, so we have to keep them in open diagonals. Yeah, so uh, once again, when it comes to the knight, we always have to maintain them in the center, and then yeah, so if possible, we need to find an outpost square, and then yeah, so try to shift the knights towards an outpost. Rooks are also fine, shifting them to the open files, and then shifting them to the seventh rank if possible. Queen, we need to centralize it, and we need to always make sure it can be retreated so that it won't get trapped. But yeah, when it comes to king, sir, what should we do with the king? Because the purpose of castling itself is to move our king towards the corner so that the king would be quite safe, right? So we don't have much activity with the king when it comes to middle game. So what are you gonna suggest for the king? Yeah. So basically, again, there is nothing much. You just need to make sure one small thing. Yeah, when it comes to the king. Yeah. So in the middle game out of curiosity, you will be very much calculating the middle game strategies in a very deep way. Yeah. So at times you might even, yeah, after all those calculation, you might even miss that your king is having a sort of back rank weakness. Yeah. So imagine, let's say you have a situation like this. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So it looks like pretty much you're winning this game, right? So you're having a queen and also you're having a knight. Yeah. So pretty much it is winning for you. But let's say black is gonna play rook to e1 and create a back rank checkmate like this. Uh, how uh, how disheartening it would be. Yeah. So losing a game in a winning situation like this, it will make you like very yeah, so it will make you very upset, right? So you're winning the game, but you didn't see the back rank weakness of your king, and then you're getting checkmated now in a winning situation, right? So basically, in the middle game, you will definitely have a situation like where, sir, I really don't know how to proceed from the situation. So I'm gonna just play a waiting move so that my opponent will play something, he will plan something, and I'm gonna respond to that. So in those cases, just simply move your hedge pawn or g pawn. Yeah, create one escaping square to your king like this. Okay, because if you don't create an escaping square for your king, sometimes yeah, you can also face some troubles. Yeah. So this is once again just for the safety of the king, nothing much. Yeah. When it comes to the king, I'm gonna just give you one easy point to maintain in the middle game. Just avoid back rank weakness. Simple. Yeah. So okay. All right. This is with the placement of pieces when it comes to the middle game. Yeah. So let's have a quick recap of what we have to do with the pieces. Yeah. When it's starting with the pawns, when it comes to the pawns, just maintain a good pawn structure. That is enough. And when it comes to the bishops, try to shift your sleeping bishops towards an open diagonal. This you can do in your middle game. When it comes to the knights, most of the knights it would be in the center, but try to identify an outpost and then try to shift your knights to an outpost so that you can make the most out of it. And when it comes to the rooks, just try to shift the rooks, sleeping rooks to the open files, and then, if possible, try to shift them to the seventh rank so that it would be a deadly rook combination. When it comes to the queen, my first priority, trade it as soon as possible. Because if you're gonna give queen to your opponent, sometimes he can also take advantage of it. But yeah, if you're gonna play with the queens, then try to centralize it, and then yeah, so make sure your queen is always having a retreating square, so that it can be accessed anywhere. And the last thing is the king. Yeah, so king is very simple. We're not going to do anything much when it comes to the middle game with the king. So just simply avoid some back rank weakness with your king. That's it. Okay, so yeah. So these are the things when it comes to the placement of pieces in the middle game. So maybe I would like to stop it here. If you have any questions, like feel free to type it in the chat. So maybe yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay, maybe after this one, it would be an end game basically. Yeah. So after your middle game is done, it would be an end game. Usually, if you can able to, yeah, so follow all these points and then make the most out of your pieces in the middle game, you will be pretty much having a good end game. Yeah. Fine. So yeah, that's the stuff. So hope you have enjoyed this series. So once again, thank you so much. Yeah, for joining. And yeah, so do like, share, and subscribe to our Premier Chess Academy channel for more exciting upcoming videos and lessons. I'll see you on another video. Until then, bye. Stay tuned. Thank you so much. Yeah, and we are also posting one. Yeah, so link in the chat. You can find it. And yeah, feel free to register yourself for a free trial class with Premier Chess Academy. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.